Hi, and welcome to our panel. This panel is about the future of brand partnerships and influencer marketing. My name's Ian Greenblatt. I'm the managing director of technology, media, and telecommunications at JD Power. JD Power you might have heard of. Many people think of it as the car trophy people. We do a couple other things. One of them, you may have seen wireless companies touting that they might have the best network. That'd be my team and my group telling them that they do. So, without further ado, you're not here to see me. You're here to listen to an incredible panel. And I'm going to ask them, I'm not going to let them do anything. I'm going to ask them politely to introduce themselves. Let's start with Angela Turner. Angela, please tell us who you are, where you work, what you do.
I am Angela Turner. Thank you for the quick introduction, Ian. I oversee marketing and PR with Revolt, and we are the hip hop centered brand owned by Sean Diddy Combs. And I've been at Revolt since its launch almost 8 years ago.
Wow, fantastic. I can't wait to talk about this. This is going to be exciting. I'm going from right to left on my screen. Ashley, could you tell us a little bit about well, who you are, what you do, and where you do it for?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Ashley Schroeder. I'm the senior lead of global creator marketing at Pinterest. I've been at Pinterest about 4 years, and we've been marketing to creators as an audience and building for creators in the last year and a half or so. So it's a really exciting time for Pinterest as a platform, and I'm excited to be here with all of you.
Very cool. Thank you and welcome. Sticking with the ladies first theme, I see Sloan over there. Hi, Sloan. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do?
Yeah, I'm Sloan. I live in Nashville. I'm the head of crossover and digital in the Nashville office, WME, and then also an agent. I'm sorry if my camera goes in and out because I have a dog that has a squeaky ball that he won't let me have. So that could be why. And also still a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays from Nashville.
Thank you. Sticking with the agency theme, Randy, welcome. Tell us a little bit about what you do, where you do it.
Thank you, Ian. I am an agent in the Global Branded Entertainment Department at ICM Partners. Takes me everything from national televised Super Bowl like commercials all the way down to small digital deals that exist only on Instagram. So everything in between and with all types of talent.
Outstanding. And rounding out this panel of all stars, Andrew. Andrew, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do?
Sure, Ian. Great to see you. I'm Andrew Thompson. I'm president of California for Wunderman Thompson. I always chuckle when I say president of California. It's an unusual title, but I oversee a number of offices here in California. Wunderman Thompson is, I think we may now be the largest agency of the world in the world, and we've come together. We came together a few years ago by bringing the data side of Wunderman, the legacy communications from J. Walter Thompson, and the digital focus from Possible, which is really my side of the business.
Outstanding. So we have agents, we have agencies, we have platforms, we have content. This is going to be a lot of fun as we talk about, again, that future of brand partnerships, brands coming together, and how influencers are a part of that. When last we spoke, some of the folks like Andrew had been on a similar panel that I led. I think it was all the way back in May, which, by the way, seems like 12 years ago now. We talked about, I think one of the things we talked about was brand safety and talking about how we bring influencers in. And one of the scariest parts about bringing in influencers is what they're going to say. Now, obviously, we love authenticity. Authenticity is key. It's why you bring in an influencer and looking for their particular audience. And the danger, right, to your brand if they go off key, if you will. Well, in our setup call, I think it was Randy who said something absolutely fantastic, and I want to start with that about how disappointing it is if an influencer isn't incredibly authentic and take a stand and have a stand on a particular issue. So Randy, do you think you could elaborate a little bit on what we were talking about and why that's why it's so key now that influencers have something to say?
Of course, of course. Probably now, again, 12 months after the last panel, we live in a world of shared experience like never before, where we're all very much kind of in the same world, sharing the same ups and downs and the roller coaster of what this past year has been. And for any talent to ignore what is happening outside of their windows and walls, whether that be COVID, whether that be social justice, Black Lives Matter, what's happening with the elections, without that, there's an extreme disconnect with them and how everyone else is living in the world that everyone else is living in. And as that kind of intersects in a world of brand, to speak very inauthentically to the life that the rest of us are leading means that it's very hard to take a brand message and really have that hit home. So we've really seen in the past couple months brands imploring people to speak and looking to see what their statements are and not running from that apolitical, agnostic world that that maybe we were in 12 months ago, truly.
And I think some of that might be, oh, sorry, go ahead, Angela.
Oh, I'm going to guess we're going to say the same thing, Andrew, but it's interesting now in this space and unforeseen time where we're so disconnected in many ways from others. Influencers, I think, are that piece to help a lot of consumers and us as customers feel a little more connected to one another.
Yeah, you're both absolutely right. And I think part of this change represents a maturity of the medium. I think brands have gotten more and more comfortable knowing that if they want something completely safe where there's zero chance of any kind of issue, well, they can put out their own message. But if they get that from someone who they are bringing in and usually hiring, or at least in some way compensating as an influencer, they're going to get a watered down message. So they'd rather have something strong and take a little more risk. And we've really seen that evolve for clients.
Yeah, Andrew, I think there was a time when we would talk to brands and they would say, yeah, we want to work with so-and-so because but they just said something really bad and they need to take it down. We don't have that but statement now. It's just, we really want to work with them because they're them and because they're saying the things that they're saying. So there's a little more nexus to kind of the truthfulness and the authenticity that, and it makes our job better because they can really be them and they can say the things that talent can say, the things that they want to say, and influencers can.
I'm going to agree one more time, Randy and Andrew. The time is now where I think brands and customers expect an authentic, real voice from brands and companies and influencers now more than ever, right? Good and bad. And we've just seen a lot of that in place over the last week in this country, right? So good and bad. The expectation is there to be about something, say something, and have it come from an authentic place.
And COVID has sort of become this great equalizer in a way when it comes to everyone, whether you're a celebrity, an influencer, an everyday person, we're all at home and we're all experiencing this shutdown. And so it lowers that expectation for production fidelity, which is really interesting when it comes to actual asset creation, but it raises the bar in terms of what an audience expects from creators or celebrities or influencers, because we all know we're going through this together. And whether it's from a brand or an influencer or both in partnership, we expect that authenticity and acknowledgement. And it's what people want more than anything else. I mean, even thinking about Pinterest, like our user base grew significantly since last March because people were actually coming to Pinterest looking for content from influencers and creators that they could act on at home, and that was not necessarily Pinterest perfect, but was just like attainable and real. And honestly, if that was in partnership with a brand, even better, because then they knew how they could like go do it or what they needed to buy or whatever it was.
Let me ask about from an artist perspective or from an influencer perspective, and I'll ask our two agents. Is that part of when an influencer wants to work with a brand or outbound deal creation? Is that I want to say this. I want to work with this brand because I have something to say. Is that part of the calculus, or is it or not? Let's start with Randy.
Um, I think I think there is somewhat of a two-way street. There are very aware influencers out there of what brands are speaking their message and saying the type of things they want to say or hitting an audience that they want to hit. I think that is part of the calculus for not everyone, but we certainly have heard from a variety of talent on our roster say, you know, did you see this tweet that they just put up? Let's talk to them today because I want to be part of that message. The support that they've given to X movement or Y movement, how can I lend my voice to that? And then there's another charitable component too, which in this world, you know, whether it's helping restaurants, whether it's helping the homeless, whether it's helping the hungry, that's a huge part of what's going on now as well. So it's the two-way street has kind of opened up, I think, wider lanes than it ever has at the moment, and there is more of a discourse.
I have to add, I just think too, there's like, just going with what Randy said, it's a lot more awareness. A lot of our clients aren't, I mean, I work a lot in music and in sports, like a lot of our clients aren't on the road and as busy doing things as they were before. So I feel like the big awareness of like things that you can do outside of like just, right, and like awareness of these companies and what they stand for and what they're saying. And I think, I mean, I love it, to be honest. It's like when I have my clients, like, I really want to work with this brand. I want to do a voiceover for this commercial. And it's like when there's a passion behind it, as opposed to, hey, I have an offer for $100,000 for them to post on Instagram, as opposed to like, there was like, go back to being authentic. And that's probably going to be the word of this panel, of having an authentic reason to post about it. And they're actively using this product, or they're actively, you know, watching this show or whatever. So I think it also 2020, you know, just in a bigger like perspective.
You may have seen through my line of questioning, right? Which is, tell me what do brands think, what do influencers think, when they work together, right? When co-branding, for example, with retailers, how do you use influencers who aren't necessarily famous or in the zeitgeist, but are effective? And how do you balance the brand with the retailer? Andrew, let me ask you, like, for example, if you're using Walmart moms to market Axe deodorant.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's such an interesting question, right? Influencers, of course, range from the biggest of the big with massive, massive followings, a lot of really interesting kind of long tail, but then we often see a lot of influence by people who are definitely not influencers and certainly not as their job. So in our work with Axe, you know, we saw a brand that was really struggling with a lot of competitive pressure and some sales declines. And we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we give millennial moms who suddenly are at a place where they've got these adolescents, these teens, and giving them the ability to have conversations, right? So we kind of had this target of this sort of young man, older teens, and those boys weren't being included in the conversation as they were entering puberty. So we tried to figure out ways for moms to talk to their kids, which is pretty simple, something we all have to figure out. But and of course, you know, the way you would normally do that is through humor. So we recruited all these Walmart moms and then let them tell us about the conversations they were having. And as you might imagine, everyone's kind of flocking to see what did other moms say that were successful? What was another way to draw a kid into a conversation that usually the kids just like walks out of the room or like puts their hand up or gets back into the video game. So we ended up having 1.8 million video views and 31% increase in social engagements, which was amazing as a KPI. But with this kind of influence, what you're really looking for is sales. And we ended up totally reversing this trend and doubling sales growth. So we got a gold Effie for that, which is something we're really excited about. And I just love those awards because they are about how effective was this program and eventually driving sales.
That's very cool. So you've done a lot of work with moms whose kids are at different stages. are there other Instagram stories or other talk or, any struggles that you're talking about? Like, for example, like I know you did a deal with Kroger Babies Formula.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think that works here. I suspect we'll get a little bit of engagement around the table here.
Yeah, it's in that sort of similar vein of activating normal people and ending up at scale, getting a tremendous amount of influence. So it, it is hard to imagine a more vulnerable state than being a new mom who's having a hard time having their child eating, right? Drinking milk and getting fed, right? It's just this incredible, visceral, painful thing to go through. And I think most people go through it alone because it feels shameful, right? Like I'm not doing my job because I'm not able to feed my child. And so we try to pull that out. And so for Kroger's infant formula brand, we had this kind of amazing store brand that I think sometimes moms are not sure whether that's something they're into, and we ended up doing these long form blog posts and really gave a chance for in-depth emotional storytelling, because I think this authenticity, which so many of the panelists have been talking about, it's as important with when you've got like big time celebrities and when you've got like these kind of just everyday people. So we can layer that in with seeding it through Instagram stories to be able to kind of give advice, send people back to the blogs, and really kind of develop this this community and this kind of flywheel. So this was a little paid media to get it started, but then what it really ended up happening was building a community, getting people coming here to say, how can I get tips, and then giving reactions to that. And once you get that momentum, it really gets moving.
So building community. I'm looking at you, Angela. Revolt is about community. It's about creating a voice. Tell us a little bit about influencer marketing, creating that sense of community, and how you're reaching the people you want to reach. Right? Is that influencers? Is that placement? Is that particular inventory that you're looking to put impressions in? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's a unique proposition that we have the benefit of being in, right? In this time, in this moment, Revolt has authentically been who we are and the voice that we need to be for the culture. So in this moment, when brands need to show up and need to have content companies to be a voice and to have a purpose and to be untethered in who they are, we have always been that, right? So, it's been a fun ride for us at Revolt. The pandemic hit. We realized today that Revolt's been on work from home for exactly 200 Monday through Friday days as of today. So we chose to not count the weekend because then the world would know how much we work on the weekends. So we decided to only count Monday through Fridays. Today was the 200th day. So when the pandemic hit, like many of us, we just weren't sure what that would mean for our businesses. But what it meant was that we leaned into the space that was needed by our customers. And so that was being the voice for Black and Brown communities, disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And then when racial injustices needed to take center stage again, there we were showing up, being who we've always been. So our brand tends to be the influencer for other brands, if that makes sense. So we've been enjoying one of our best years ever. Our content numbers are climbing, linear, social, and digitally. We've had our best quarters with advertisers and new clients coming on board because we are who we are and our message is true in what we convey for our content.
Angela, it's interesting to kind of put it through that lens too. I think Sloan and myself, we hopefully aren't on the end of too many of these, but sometimes when you're on a talent does brand or influencer does brand and it goes wrong or the message doesn't hit as intended, a lot of people, are up in arms about how could this talent do this with this brand or take this creative and do X, Y, and Z. And oftentimes it's kind of not the talent's job to have thought that way. So, Angela, Revolt being what Revolt is and the prism that you can kind of put through brand messaging, it is really interesting because we need that more than ever. in terms of what we do on our end in talent and what brands are trying to do in connecting with audiences and getting out messages. So it's a very interesting place that Revolt sits.
Oh,
Hey,
thanks.
Angela, I think you said, you glitched a second, but you said we've been doing this for 2,000 days, right? That's what it feels like. So I'm pretty sure that's what you said.
I meant that. If we counted the weekend and dog years, it would have been 2,000 days. But can you believe it's only been 200 Monday through Friday work days?
No.
When my colleague said that on our senior call this morning, all I could do was drop my head in my hand. Like, it, honest to God, has felt like more than 200 days. But
feels like that since the election, I think. Yeah.
Oh boy, Randy.
Yeah, 2,000 days feels authentic. Sloan, I think we stepped on you before. You were about to say something about.
No, I was just going to go off to what Angela and Randy had said, just about like kind of like sometimes, you know, everyone has like the different brands that come to obviously the table, and some are just like, let's just see if this influencer sticks. Here, we're going to throw you 50 grand, post this on Instagram, swipe up, buy shampoo, whatever. But then sometimes it basically shows, let's see what that's my train of thought, but sometimes it's like just really like coming together and entrusting the influencer, right? So those are my favorite. Is I actually have a client right now that started, I guess it was in August, because the whole like record the story, send it in, then it loses clarity because it's not clear, and then we want to see what type goes on top of the story, and it was like, this isn't worth it anymore. So now we do not do any approvals. So if they want approvals, we just don't work. We say, okay, moving on, passing. Because our view is, if you trust the influencer and you really want to work with them, then you're going to trust they're going to say things. Now, granted, if it's medical or something like that, that's different. But, you know, if we're talking about like a sweater, like she's like, I know how to sell to my audience. So I don't need, you know, 27 rounds of approval. So if they want an approval, we just pass on it. Which is kind of cool though. It's a lot of steps, I'm not going to lie. But it's just the trust of working with that brand. And we did a few case studies with it with some really close brands, and it's worked so well that we literally haven't done any more approvals since August.
Gosh, I hope you don't represent any of the brands I work with.
No, I just represent the talent.
Angela, you said brand as influencer, and I that instantly clicked for me, and I want to talk a little bit about that. What is brand as influencers' responsibility? How does the brand remain authentic? Because we're in this not for altruism. I mean, to be perfectly honest, right? Most brands are in business to satisfy their shareholders at the end of the day. How does a brand as influencer remain authentic and tell that story? You're the one, Revolt's doing it really well, which is why I'm picking on you. But talk a little bit about, again, the brand remaining authentic and how do you do that when there's a financial aspect to it as well?
It's not easy, but it's so easy, right? Like, we honestly are true to who we are. When we launched, in 2013, I think we set out to be the #1 new name in music. We quickly changed because we realized we're not the new #1 name in music. We are hip hop. That is who we are. We are unapologetically hip hop. And we now say that we are unapologetically hip hop. Thankfully, the world now sees that hip hop is what sells. Hip hop is the #1 genre year after year. Hip hop is the genre that moves Coachella. Hip hop literally is the genre that sells products, right? So we are a brand that is built on what is the genre that moves the country. So we stay in that space. I'll tell you a couple of stories. I think it was a Tuesday early on, after the racial injustice conversation really started taking shape in the country. And I think a lot of brands trying to find their authentic voice wanted to do a Blackout Tuesday. Does anybody remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And as a company, we thought, how should we handle this? And several of us said, well, we don't go away on a day like that. Revolt doesn't go away on a Blackout Tuesday. Like, we are Black. We show up, and we show up louder. We don't turn off our feeds. We turn on our feeds. So we just have to always remember who we are, where we're coming from. And as much as we are a brand that is an influencer, we have influencers that work with us. We did a campaign during election with Comcast, and we created content for Comcast with Comcast called Black Voices on Mute. So our talent team had to reach out to artists who would voice those shorts. And again, Sloan and Randy, we had to reach out through agencies like yours and talent managers to pitch why artists should be part of that content series. And again, because we are a brand that conveys messages, we had amazing voices. We had voices like T-Pain and T.I. and voices you just would know because of who they are. So we are one of those brands that is a brand, but also uses influencers to tell our story. That was a long-winded question. Is the panel over now?
I think brand as influencer is becoming more and more important. We tend to really focus on data. We have this tagline where we talk about inspiring growth for ambitious brands. So we did a pretty interesting brand study that just came out about a month ago. And the idea was figuring out what are the most inspirational brands. And it turns out 72% of consumers say that they want brands to be inspirational, which is actually a lot higher than I expected. I thought most of the time consumers were just like, yeah, just be a brand. Just, tell me my shoes, you don't need to inspire me. It's actually what people want. But only about 50% actually find those brands to be inspirational. So we came up with this idea called the Inspire Score. And it's really pretty fascinating thinking about what is it that makes a brand inspire people, both for big and for small brands, when you know that that's what's being asked for by consumers.
I'm making a note because I'm going to use that Inspire Score in the future, Andrew.
Oh yeah, you should check it out. You can download the white paper. It's quite good. And you'll see a lot of the usual suspects on this kind of top 100 list, but also some that are higher or lower than you might have expected.
It does sound a lot like that two-way street though that we talked about at the beginning. If brands are looking to influencers, what's your stance and what are you saying and how are you out there? I think influencers themselves and consumers themselves are looking for brands to take a position. They're not just the household cleaning supply that they buy. It's who are you and what do you stand for? And that means a lot now. It means a lot more now than it seems like it ever has, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ashley, how so you're speaking to creators, right? Folks who come to a Pinterest and we'll talk about the direct relationship platforms in a second. Although I would argue that Pinterest is somewhat of a direct relationship platform, right? You have creators and folks who seek to pin what they love about what they're showing off in order to take it home, do it themselves, or at least create, or if you're like my wife, create inspiration rooms. Projects she'll never attend to. Don't ever tell her I said that. What I'm keen to hear about though is how do creators remain authentic, right? Is there a way to talk a little bit about that on your platform?
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's interesting. My wheels are turning because as I'm hearing inspiration be talked about, our mission is quite literally to bring people inspiration to create a life they love. And so many people, over 440 million people every month, come to Pinterest looking for creators, looking for content that then they go act on. And that's what makes Pinterest arguably very different than other platforms right now out in the world, because the mindset and the purpose and the intent of a user coming is such a quality. Like users love ads because they want to know where to buy that, leather brown couch they discover. Or if they don't know how to see through that recipe, it's actually frustrating for them. And so being a part of creators right now is a really exciting time because we're pivoting as a platform. We focused on, of course, our advertisers and of course our pinners, which are the people coming to Pinterest. But now finally we're building for creators, because without creators, Pinterest just wouldn't exist. And 10 plus years ago, creator was defined very differently when Pinterest started than what creator is defined as now. And when we first started, up until a few years ago, it was a lot about, the bloggers who wanted to drive traffic, and that's how they monetized. And they would put pins on Pinterest. People would discover them by searching with their intent. And then it was a touch point to something else, right? And with our new products and formats, which are launching this year, a creator does not need a website or a destination. And we know that they don't really have them as much anymore either. They're used to these native platforms where they build an audience, they engage directly with that audience, and they publish content and they make money, right? And so I'm so excited because, to your question about creators and what they can do on Pinterest, is now we have capabilities for them to create fresh content right on Pinterest. We're calling them story pins, which comes to no surprise. And that's a way for them to build an audience and engage and have a two-way conversation with that audience right on the platform. And I think, given the sort of formula between the mindset of someone coming to Pinterest and the intent they have, and creators and their expertise, Pinterest is a perfect place for them to meet right where they are, because there's that leaned in audience waiting for creators. And other platforms are great, don't get me wrong, like, you should cross promote, be everywhere if you're a creator, but the quality of the audience on Pinterest is really there looking for authentic content from creators. And the last thing I'll say about the new format is, we've had this notion of Pinterest perfect for years, and I feel like we've almost all, it's intimidating, right? But the cool thing about these new formats and what audiences arguably want, to our earlier points, is like, take the mask off. Like, who are you? You're in your home. We're all in our home. We want you in front of your camera, just like you would on Instagram stories. Like, tell us, here are my 5 tips for getting through Monday, or here's my recipe, or here's how I organize my closet. But we want to see all of it. And that's what people on Pinterest want to see, which is what I need to market to the world this year. So it's exciting.
Well, we're about shameless plugs here. That's okay. That's really cool, and a perfect extension, I think, of what Pinterest really is. It was previously static content, exciting, interesting content that motivated audience would find. But I do like the concept of pinners being more than just static content. I think that's a fantastic idea. And that brings us again to what we were talking about before, like direct relationship with your audience. The elimination of my own website. No, I'm going to use this platform that allows me to create and then ultimately monetize an audience. Things like Substack or Cameo or OnlyFans. It's that brave new world, Andrew, that you were talking about in our setup call. How does that change the relationship between brands and influencers?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's been probably the biggest change that we've seen in the last year. And, COVID drove between 2 and 10 years of innovation in a couple of months, right? So, if you look at, I have a friend who runs a tech-focused hedge fund, and all the bets he was expecting to have happen over 5 years happened in a few months, right? They were up 75% as a fund last year because they were betting on the future. Similarly, we all had to figure out how to make these big changes. And whether you were a content publisher, whether you were someone who used to be dependent on in-person events, and I think it's really interesting looking at Cameo and what people who don't have as much to do as celebrities can do with their free time. I think it's really interesting to look at something like OnlyFans from a business model standpoint. If you're an exotic dancer, your place of business went away and has not come back. Many, many, many people have figured out ways to actually make more money more safely that they get more of. So I think it's very healthy for in many ways, but it is certainly disintermediation. And all of us in our different ways, we are the mediators, right? So it puts us in a really interesting place as we think about what happens. And one of the things we talked about in our setup call, which is kind of interesting to think about, is perhaps this is how someone grows to a certain size. And then at a certain size, perhaps they then need professional assistance to help them market or represent themselves. In the same way that it used to be that a record company signed you, you made an album, and then they marketed it. Now you make an album, you market it, and then a record company signs you. So I think all of this is just continuing to change, continuing to flip. And our jobs are just to be really, really on top of the trends and make sure we know how to help people at the right time.
Look, I love that example, Andrew. Sorry, Sloan, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, because it's hit on the head of our world. Like it's like a proof of concept, right? Like, so as an agency, I remember, like back in the day, I don't know when that was, before me, I guess, you wouldn't really sign an artist if they didn't have a record deal or a team in place. At least where I'm at in country space, we sign artists like if they're born with a guitar in their hand, we're like, we should sign them. But it's like, because you're helping develop their entire career and do everything as opposed to just wait, there's so many other things. And if anything, 2020, I mean, I've spent a lot of my days and nights with live streaming and how do we do this? How can we sell tickets? How many you're going to sell? And what should the ticket be for sale? I mean, like just questions you're going to ask, right? And there's always talk of doing live streams, but never like to the, like, we really can't do or have to do them. And then along the lines of is something that I think that will probably change for the better is there are a lot of companies that will do these like meet and greets. So instead of you buying VIP tickets and meeting an artist, that could be a long time before an artist lets a bunch of people stand in their catacall and shake their hand, hug, and get their photo made. I mean, it's gonna be forever. They can do it on their phone. They can just have a more intimate conversation than like, hey, nice to meet you, picture, moving on. You know what I mean? And the price point can be higher. You can sell less of them, more money or same or not more money. So I mean, while it does suck that we can't do live events now, there have been some cool things to come out of this, in my opinion. I don't know if that answered anyone's question, but that's my opinion.
And I'm going to just give a little story to your cool things that came out of quarantine, right? DJ D-Nice literally became a household name to so many people who did not know of him before the COVID. Right? Before the COVID pandemic, so many people did not know of him, even though he was a super popular hip hop DJ in the 80s and 90s. But because of what he did with his platform in bringing people together, he has pulled brands into what he does. He's become more accessible to more people because Sloan and Andrew, like you said, it's the new way in which we gather.
I like that, the new way in which we gather.
Yeah,
that's a great way.
I don't want to call it a new normal. I really hate that expression, right? It's not normal. Nothing about this is normal.
What is normal anymore?
It's not.
That defies description, I believe. Randy, do you have any talent that does things like Substack or Cameo and OnlyFans? And what's that dynamic like?
It's interesting still for the talent agency's place in that. I think kind of Sloan, as you alluded to, and Andrew, there's a scalability, on the side of how much can we stay on our talent to sit down for an hour and bust out a bunch of cameos, and what is that worth to the talent, and what is that worth to us, and where do we fit in as talent agents to the whole kind of the paradigm there. We have plenty of talent looking at both, but I think more to Sloan's point, we've been gearing them or steering them more towards what do live stream look like, what do meet and greets look like, less so the fan engagement or celebrity engagement platforms than it is kind of the live streams, the meet and greets. Not just have concerts been canceled, but Comic-Cons, which are a huge revenue source for talent. And things of that nature, they've all been taken away. So it's the investment into not what adequately replaces it, because I don't think anything adequately replaces in-person live, but what can substitute for the moment. And then also for fans, what is what is the fan moment, and what makes the fan still feel engaged. So we're kind of across the universe of celebrity engagement platforms, and I think Cameo is the bright lights one, but there's also the downstream of live stream meet and greet, and that whole world which has opened up like never before through this process or through this
I think, I
time.
think, I think at the end of the day, good content is going to continue to be interacted with and loved, and crap content is going to not go anywhere. And it's the same thing with these new platforms. You know, and I would add Patreon to the list of what you've been talking about. But I mean, if you know, if you look at someone like Brian Baumgartner, who played Kevin on The Office, right? He got a lot of press for being the #1 earner on Cameo because he does a really good job. Like, he spends the time, he does the research, he makes them engaging and funny. And then people say, oh my gosh, you've got to get a Cameo. It's amazing. His are so good. We got some cameos at one point just for like a silly office thing. And there were incredible cameos. There were terrible cameos, right? So the word spreads on that the way it has always spread on all content.
Yeah, democratizing content will always create better art, but Andrew, to your point, it will also create a lot of shitty art. So it's the process of wading through and sifting through, and it makes our job, I think, better on the higher end because you're gonna find things, but it makes the job a little harder because there's just a lot out there, and there's a lot of people earning, and it's who do you want to pursue and who do you kind of want to let earn doing their thing. So it's just become a different process and a different analysis.
Interesting. I like where we were going before with the concept of live streaming and a get together, but not really getting together. And it made me, yearn for the days of leaving this room, and the concept of in person. Once we can have physical events again, please. How do you use those events to create that digital community? So let's turning it around, right? So right now we're creating those communities on those digital engagement platforms, and we're doing it on a one-to-one or a one-to-few basis. Let's turn that around, right? If Angela, we ever get back to whatever normal looks like, how do we use those physical events to create that digital engagement?
I'll use a quick example. Revolt had been doing a Revolt Summit for the last 2 years, sponsored by AT&T or in partnership with AT&T. And this past year, of course, like everyone else, we had to do it virtually. It allowed us with AT&T to provide a greater access to more people, because it went from being an event in 3 cities that cost money, that you attended over 3 days, to an event that is now open to whomever has access to Wi-Fi to participate in. So our challenge as a company is to make sure that that inclusiveness remains, that we continue to have a digital component as well as a live component, to make sure that access doesn't go away when we have space that is confined by numbers, when we get back to whatever this new space is.
Right on. Right on. I see you nodding vociferously, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like, I think about, we were just speaking of some of the new tools that we all have in our bag to learn and figure out and put into place. I really do regret the tools that we don't have, right? When I think about the partnerships that we would do, we would often use influencers at an event. When I think about, like, there's a hair care brand called TRESemmé, and there's probably a hair care band as well. And we did this thing for Unilever and Walgreens, and the idea was like, okay, how can we get people thinking about Walgreens as a beauty destination? So in this case, using someone who was much more of a known influencer, Shea Marie, who's a fashion influencer known as Peace Love Shea. She's got 1.3 million followers on Instagram, not the biggest, but pretty significant. And so she spent all this time at Fashion Week democratizing what it's like for everyday people who are more likely to shop at Walgreens to be able to have a Fashion Week experience. We are all trying to figure out, and all of our clients are trying to figure out how to put events online and how to do the best job we can. But I also will be loud and proud and say, we're missing something, right? It's not the same when we can't gather. We don't get that same punch and the access that we get to bring people into. I really regret not having that for our clients.
And Ian, I think to your question, and this is a terrible answer, but I think it's true too. It has to be good, and it has to be different when we get back out there. Things have to be good and things have to be different. And if there's a reason for people at home to follow along, then they will. And if there's a reason for a digital community to pay attention to what an influencer is saying, or a band is playing, or an actor is live streaming from set, then they'll watch. They always will if it's good content and if it stays unique and different. Ashley, that's probably a lot of what keeps people coming back to your platform, is there's so much good that's different and it stays interesting. So that's the key. And there's no secret sauce to good, and there's no secret sauce to different. It's going to be up to kind of individual influencer, individual talent to figure out what that is that carries over when we go live back to digital.
And to add to that, Randy, I think it's going to be interesting to see what platforms like Pinterest and Instagram and others do to sort of augment and complement and help grow once we're back to in real life. You know, how can platforms be an extension of in-person events when people are now going to expect to be able to access everything digitally as well as in person? There's going to be, you know, of course, IGTV is huge, and we are going to have products that are coming out that are going to allow creators to engage and teach and things like that. And I'm just going to be curious to see how the space from a platform perspective evolves to meet the needs of marketers and meet the needs of creators as our world sort of goes back to normal, but with this expectation of digital extension always.
Very cool. So we're around the 5-minute mark, a little less than that. And so what I want to do is go around the horn and dust off our crystal balls. And you know, Angela, we were laughing about what does normal look like, because no one knows anymore. But gazing into your crystal ball, as we very gratefully have the dumpster fire that was 2020 in the rearview mirror, what does life look like when we do this panel again? Because we will get together, I hope, and do this panel again. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Let's go forward to the next CES. Maybe it's in person. I suspect it will be. What does the world look like in January of 22 when we can come back together?
I know you called on me, but I was just going to act like you didn't really want me to talk first. I don't know. My hope is that it is more inclusive, right? I think we have all learned, and we now know ways and have tools and have demonstrated ways that we can open things up, even though we are very much confined. Right. And I think that becomes my goal as a leader and as a Black leader, is to help ensure that access is there, and that the things that are now available to people just because they have Wi-Fi remain that way. And that it's just not about those who can attend a concert, or those who can attend CES, or those who can attend an event live and in person. How do we continue to include others that may not be in our same space? So that's my goal. That is my hope. And I'm going to take the vaccine and hope that I get there.
Yeah, I want to help you do that. That sounds amazing. Sloan, you next. What does this look like when we get to climb out of our holes here? And what will our community, right, of brands and influencers look like in January 22?
I think a lot more compromise, I like to say, because I feel like we've learned like how to make anything possible in this year. Like anything is possible if we learned that from 2020, bad and good. Like you got to figure it out, right? So I think they're just 2020 opened and like in 2021, 2022 is like more options. We're here are all of our options now. We have so many more options than we did before, especially doing things virtually. So, you know, whether that's, I mean, as small as like you have a brand launch and your talent can't make it because get their planes diverted. Well, you know what? They can probably go to the airport lounge now and do a Zoom call and be on the Today Show. And no one was before it would be like, nope, we're done. We're canceled. We can't do this. Like now there's just so many more opportunities and options, which could also be bad for us too. But I think that's one of the big things that's gonna be in 2022 is just people have more options. As like small as that sounds. Angela, yours was very more profound than mine was.
I think they go hand in hand. And again, like I think we're saying something similar, right?
Yeah. We have to wrap, so I'm gonna limit it to 30 seconds. Ashley, same question to you.
I think I agree with accessibility, flexibility. I think what I would like to see both as a consumer and a marketer is this continued trend of organic and spontaneous content and people who you would never think would open their homes to you, like celebrities, creators, are more accessible, and you're seeing the real versions of everyone. And I hope that that continues, because I think that that is only going to make way for more authentic content, more quality brand partnerships. Platforms are going to have more content that users want to come and engage with and see. So I just think that that barrier being lowered and that accessibility to everyone, to each other, with the technology we now know we have available to us.
Excellent. Lightning round, Randy. What do you see?
Yeah, I'd say I'm not by nature Mr. Optimism, but
attorneys.
I think it will be extremely celebratory and a lot more mindful. I think people are ready to get back to being with each other and learning the lessons together that we've learned individually and alone. And those are a lot. Those are a lot of lessons. So I think it will be extraordinarily celebratory when we're all together in a year.
I like it. And Andrew, take us home.
Listen, this is a really cool time because the pandemic snuck up on us, obviously, like that. This is a chance where we actually get to plan. We know it might be 6 months, might be 8 months, but we know that very soon we're going to be in a post-vaccine world. So we have time to plan for ourselves, we have time to plan for our companies, and we have time to plan for our clients. So now is a really important time to be planning and be ready. Consumers are going to be hurting for a long time. This vaccine is going to come relatively quickly, but consumers are going to be hurting for a long time. They're going to need inspiration and they're going to need value. Brands are also, most brands, a few are real successes, but most are going to also be hurting for a while. They're going to need to do more with less. So we need to be more efficient in our media, in our messaging, and in our planning.
Excellent. Fantastic. Folks, that's time. I want to thank you, first of all. This was a fantastic conversation, and I'm delighted all of you were able to make the time to do it. So let me thank Ashley. Let me thank you, Angela. Let me thank you, Randy. Let me thank you, Andrew. And let me thank you, Sloan. This was fantastic. Thanks so much to the audience for watching, and we'll see you again soon, I sure hope. Thanks again also to Victor Harwood and Digital Hollywood for putting this together. Thanks again.
Thanks again.